to justify this kind of behavior is a kind of reinvention of the meaning of the word respect. It seemed to me, when I was growing up, that respect meant that you took people seriously. It didn't mean that you never disagreed with them. To respect someone is to say, okay, we'll take on what you have to say, and if I don't agree with it, I will offer a counter-argument. The idea that it would be disrespectful to someone to in any way disagree from their system of belief is a new idea, it's a new meaning of the term respect. And it seems to me to have nothing to do with respect. And what it actually means is I'm too afraid to do it. So what you have is cowardice masquerading as respect. And that's become more and more and more common, and very clear in the case of the cartoons. Because I think the point you made, which needs to be said a great deal, is that blasphemy, the refusal to accept the church as the limiting point on thought, is something which throughout human history has been the thing that has moved the human race forward. I mean, you mentioned Galileo and Socrates. And one should also remind people that the trial of Jesus Christ was a blasphemy trial.
Sure was.
And from those three, you could say you have, Western religious belief, Western scientific understanding, and Western philosophy. They all emerge from blasphemy cases.
Yeah, he was asking for trouble by saying he was the Son of God.
Yes. Yeah.
He knew what he was doing, as they used to say meaningfully. Don't you?
I remember that. I always was amused, or not amused, it wasn't funny at the time. When people said that about me that I knew what I was doing, it would be really strange, I thought, to spend 5 years writing a novel and not know what you were doing. What would that be, that act?
But then another thought, though, which I meant to intrude earlier, you were raised a Muslim.
Yeah, well,
so you can be accused of apostasy.
I know, except my parents were about as Muslim as a chewed-off fingernail. I've always thought that the great gift my parents gave me was to not be religious. They sort of excused me religion.
No, that's true, but in the eyes of the
I know, yes,
of the Ummah, you belong. Like just as that's why people say lapsed Catholic. You can't leave the church unless you're excommunicated.
No. If I'd been called Harvey Weinstein, there would have been no fatwa.
Well, there wouldn't have been.
I mean, maybe there should have been. That's another question.
Yes, actually, that's a very tempting. No, never mind. That's not good. But with you and Ayan Hirsi Ali and with Taslima Nasreen and many others, there's the question of apostasy, which Muslims can, if they like, claim as their internal affair. What's interesting now with Denmark is a new line, and Comedy Central, and a couple of other events in London, is that the line's being crossed now. You don't have to be a Muslim to be brought within the range of reprisal.
I remember quite soon after the attack on the Standing Verses being sent by a fan a T-shirt on which was the legend, "Blasphemy is a victimless crime." Which, think about it. Mm-hmm. And then you realize that it's completely in line with your with God is not great, because of course it's God who is the victim who doesn't exist.
Yes, Salman rather woundingly said of my title that it was annoyingly one word too long. Just circumcise one word and you've got the truth.
I wanted to ask you a couple of things. I think, yes, we should come back to this a bit, but it seemed to me one of the things that to people of our generation, it's very strange, I think, is the recrudescence of religion as a political force. Because when we were kids in the 60s, there were many things that were up there that we needed to fight against. I don't think it ever occurred to us that the power of religion, whatever religion, would once again be the thing we had to battle. We actually thought that battle was won. And it turns out that we were wrong. And I wanted to ask you why you think that is. What is it? One of the things that André Malraux is supposed to have said and apparently did not say is that the 21st century will be the century of religion. Apparently he didn't say that. But it seems so far, on the basis of 10 years, to be the case. And I wonder why you think it is that this battle that we all thought was over has returned to become the central battle of our time.
Well, Lenin apparently really did say that he thought the last battle would be between communism and Islam. partly because Islam was a competitor in the Third World against imperialism, which in some ways it can still represent itself as being. So I think that a approximate cause, not an exact one, but an approximate cause would be a contributing cause, probably is the collapse of communism. Not least in the Soviet Union itself, or rather in former Soviet territory itself, where now, for example, the Russian Orthodox Church, the old patron of serfdom and Tsarism and anti-Semitism, is now fully back in a very dangerous nationalist form. It's the clerical bodyguard to Putin's regime. It has special privileges within the state, the army and elsewhere, and over all other faiths in Russia. By the way, I think it'll be a very dangerous thing as Russian chauvinism and revanchism gets more increased. We have a tremendous revival of the forces of reaction in the Roman Catholic Church, exemplified by this very squalid Bavarian bureaucrat who's the current Pope, whose first act as Pope was to readmit to the Church those who'd been excommunicated for denying the Holocaust and so on, to rebuild the hard right-wing element of Catholicism that basically thought Vatican II was a mistake. So re-fundamentalizing what they still think of as the one true Church. Then you have the crazy settlers in occupied territories in Palestine who think that they can bring on the Messiah by stealing Arab land. And then you have the Christians who say, wouldn't that be a great idea? We support the Jews as the rope supports the hanging man. They bring on the apocalypse, we get Jesus back. A lot of whom are in this country and trying still to maintain, this goes on too, I wouldn't have believed it, that American children should be taught garbage with equal time. No. Now girls and boys, after the chemistry practice, will have alchemy break.
I remember.
It's enough to make a cat laugh, isn't it? But they never stop in Texas and also big school book producing areas. That this nonsense is unstoppable.
Now, I remember at the time that the state of Kansas decided that intelligent design had to be taught at the same level as that straight, vaguely unproved theory of Darwinism. It actually, I wrote a piece in which I suggested that this decision by the state of Kansas showed that Darwin was wrong, because it showed that natural selection did not always choose the fittest to survive, and sometimes the unfittest survived, and that it was actually possible for the human race to regress as well as progress. So there was a wonderful, in Alabama, I remember, there was a public servant who said that we couldn't be sure about the truth of the theory about the Big Bang because nobody was there at the time.
Yes. Yes. But the equal time demand, I think, is an excellent one, because there are now a very large number of churches who take this view, who are in receipt of grants from the so-called faith-based initiative, which I'm sorry to say President Obama hasn't cancelled, or otherwise in receipt of a tax break. And so it seems to me very clear we should take them up on equal time, say we'll teach your stuff in the schools at least once a week, not in the science class, but in the social studies bit, and you have to sell and teach Darwin material 50% of the time in your church.
But, just to press you...
And that'll be the law, and see how they like a little of that.
It seems to me, even if you just look at the United States, if you look at the politics of the post-war period, if you look at the Eisenhower election, even the Kennedy election, so that it wasn't so necessary for religion to be a subject in the election. Nowadays, it seems to me you can't be elected dog catcher in America unless you talk about your deep belief in such and such church. Why do you think it is that there's so much greater power of religious discourse in this country?
I actually think that that's only true if you and everyone else keeps saying so. I mean, the number of people who check none of the above for religion in the country has doubled in the last year. The last 5 years, to something like 16-17%. I think it's probably higher. The number of people who check the box and say, I am a Baptist or I am a Catholic, I know because I go and debate in their churches, full of crisis and uncertainty. It doesn't reflect a monolithic religiosity at all. Barack Obama got elected while having to disown the only church he'd ever been near. He'd taken so little care to pick one that it nearly got him unelected, the church he went to. Since hasn't been to a church at all, and ended his inauguration speech, which I attended, with a very good quotation from Thomas Paine. So I'm not sure at all. I think if a person of reasonable integrity and honesty and presentability, let's say, was able to face the election and say, I personally don't attend a church and don't have a belief, I think there's every reason to think they could win.
Well, I hope you're right. The political right in this country clearly thinks that the religious card is well worth playing.
Yes, but the Christian right have had a very thin time lately, and the Catholic right as well. I mean, who really now thinks that the Catholic